Welcome everyone to our clinic online this really beautiful Saturday morning. I know there's a lot going on in the DC area for open studios down in Mount Rainier area. A lot of our clinic online past presenters are exhibiting down there today. So maybe if you get a chance to head over there afterwards and meet people, I think it's a great option for your beautiful Saturday morning. We have here today an incredible artist who's actually exhibiting the Stone Tower first floor the month of May. I was uh, excited to see the work in person. I mean, I've seen Eric's work where it's more of the print type kind of thing, but to really see the whole experience of both uh, drawings and sculptures and kind of the sound all combined in an exhibition is really worth checking out. So the exhibition should be up till the end of the month. I highly recommend checking it out. I first really, I guess, encountered it in person. I think I've seen Eric's work previously to this, but at Automatic was where I really got to experience the work as in person. And he was sharing a space with Steve Wan, who was another one of our presenters. And I had known Steve earlier, but getting to know Eric over the time period, I'm a huge fan of the work because it kind of fills the part of my soul, which is the little kid who was really obsessed with machinery and drawing gears and those kind of things. When I was a kid, my art teacher gave me this big chunk of metal, and I had no idea what it was, but I had a gear attached to it and so forth. And I drew this thing for hours on end. And when I look at Eric's work, it kind of harkens back to that, like the discovery process of what is this thing? Kind of feels like an archaeological dig in a way of how these things fit together and these machines that can become so many different things. And this imaginative world that Eric creates in his work, uh, it's kind of like the artwork. If I had a second life, I would really strive to do work like that because I really just think it's just an incredible display of movement and machinery and imagination together. So I'm really excited to hear more about Eric's work today and hear a little bit from Anne about kind of the collaboration that they have in the exhibition downstairs. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Eric, and I'm going to ask you to say your name,
It's Celarier, like
Celarier.
drinking
Thank you.
water.
Yeah. I am
So
awful
pretty.
with last names in general, so I'm grateful to have Eric Celarier here at our clinic online. I should know this because you're literally like just a few doors down from my house.
Yeah, it's it is what it is. I've had this name and having to try to pronounce it my entire life. It's
Well,
been
welcome to our clinic online.
all right. Thank you. All right. So welcome everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about my work, how I started, and how I sort of got to where I am today. So, whoops, got a delay on it. All right. When I went to grad school, one of the things that I was interested in doing is making models to draw from. I was a drawing major at the University of Cincinnati. And when I came out, I was almost exclusively just making sculpture. And they looked a little bit like this, only these are a little bit after grad school, and I continued to do work. Um, you'll notice that each one of these is a creature made out of the kinds of stuff we throw away. Often it will have other little bits of naturally occurring material. They all have names, and the names are taken from Latin and set about in such a way that they are like as if they were a scientific specimen of some sort. So I created what this series is called the Alternative Evolution series. I was somewhat influenced by Stephen Jay Gould. I read a bunch of his stuff. He's a paleontologist, used to write for Scientific American magazine, and I thought about the idea that the way creatures evolve is is random and that the type of change that happens in the environment tends to happen quickly and usually because of some sort of catastrophic event. The last one being 66 million years ago when a comet hit the planet and the dinosaurs didn't make it, unless you want to consider the birds dinosaurs, which they kind of are. All right. So I continued to do this work for a number of years, making sculptures, and in that time, I learned how to weld, and that allowed me to make creatures that were bigger and that were sturdy enough so that I could feel confident of them not like falling on somebody's head or something. I'm creating with these their own environment out of the creatures themselves. Like I build to a space, and you'll see that when you look at most of the different shows that I'll show you. It sort of represents looking at the space and trying to fit into the space rather than just putting stuff in without thinking about where things really go. In other words, what I like to do is make sure that I'd rather edit the amount of stuff that I have than to just try to make sure I shoehorn things in. So you can see that this is sort of a little bit of an environment I've created out of creatures. And this was over at Artists of Makers. This particular facility, they don't run this particular facility. They do another, and I'm going to show you some stuff from that new facility that I did a show in just last month. All right, so once I got out of college, out of grad school, I struggled a bit to start. I was doing graphic design, and it took up a lot of time, and it was hard to figure out where to try to. One of the things about grad school, particularly the time I went, they didn't do a very good job of helping me do the business of art, and because of that, I struggled to try to find a place to even show my stuff. But I finally figured it out through Automatic, because I met people and people told me how to do stuff, and then I found a bunch of stuff online, and then I sort of got my footing. So there's like 8 years there where I really, coming out of grad school, didn't do that much, but I started making these circuit board pieces. Uh, Once again, I'm using stuff we throw away. They have all this aesthetic quality to them that people didn't really might not even know. Like common comments were, I didn't know this was in my computer, kind of thing. And what I would do was, and there, certainly not the only circuit board artist, but what I did was put these leather frames around the pieces, and then sew them together so they fit like a quilt. And I felt that really softened or warmed what was kind of a cold material. And so there are really two types of this. There's the there's the wasteland pieces, which is really what I started with, these rectangles, and then I moved. I started changing them and starting putting holes in them. All right, and dropping the borders, and then I started doing these things I called network. And the reason I call it network is because you could take any piece and put it up to another one. They sort of had this sort of continental feel to them. They really were sort of an evolution from the rectangles that I was doing before, like that. All right, so in about 2019, I had sort of a sea change of what I was doing. I wanted to start doing more 2D work, but I wasn't ready to draw yet. And so I seized upon this idea that I could take the trash, and I saw some people who were making fish printing, which is, Japanese fish printing, which is called Gayataku. Something I've done with the kids at school because they have these like little rubber fish that you use for that. But normally most people just put paint all on it and then they just slap it down on a piece of paper. At least that's what the kids do. But I was looking at a number of different methods to do this fish printing stuff, and I started doing what's called indirect printing, which means I put the objects underneath the paper, or in this case, most of these are silk, and I get an impression of the piece, and then I just make a million monoprints that way. So I'm taking a sponge with ink on it, and I'm going over it just very lightly, and then getting the impression, sort of like you do rubbing a penny, only with a pencil, but I'm doing it with a sponge and ink. And you put it together, and I'm sort of making environments again, right? I mean, these kind of look like environments to me. And this is really a precursor to my show at Glen Echo. I made a natural history museum, right? You'll see that that this particular iteration of it is a lot less colorful than the one at Glen Echo, because I made only black and white pictures, and so I used more of the metal creatures that I was making. And part of the reason at that time I started going to the metal is I wanted to try to make outdoor pieces, because indoor pieces of sculpture are so hard to sell and find a home for. Um, but a month after that, I decided to do some color, with the idea that maybe these could represent, um, versions of. There's a lot of slides that are made of small microscopic creatures, and often at times they're stained. And I thought about that. Um, these still have a ways to go when it comes to this. In the near future, I have some ideas for making them look even a little more like stains, because they sort of have a tie-dye feel to them, that I'm still working out in my head. But one of the things about this Noma Lobby show that I did, which I often do when I put my artwork on the wall, is that I put it in not in a traditional sort of straight across the wall kind of way. I put them in what we call, I'm thinking about something called concrete poetry, where it's not just the poet, not just what the person it writes, but how it's written on the page. Like Mallarmé did a bunch of stuff like this. There are a bunch of other concrete poets where it's not just the work. The it's not just the writing. It's what the it's how it's actually set about. So I'm thinking about this, and a lot of times when I work in waves. When I put stuff on walls, you'll notice that I put a lot of stuff on waves. Here is coming out of the pandemic, because that was going right into the pandemic. If you notice, that's 2019. The pandemic was really hitting just soon after that. So I I I decided to shut everything down, and really considered just not doing art anymore, because I was, like a lot of people, it was a difficult time. But it was also, I had a lot of studio costs, and they rarely add up at the end of the year. And I have a lot of sculptures, and I'm literally paying for storage for trash, and that's really hard to do, in a lot of ways. But and then your confidence can go, right? And I'm not the first artist to struggle with their confidence, and I often do. Um, this is the show that I got because I opened a new studio, and with the I expressed intent of just drawing for a while, just because I wanted to draw, not because I thought I was going to show it to anybody, but just because I wanted to draw. And I put a couple pieces on the wall for um, this must be two years ago, and Christy Little came by, who's a curator, and said, you want to install in Windows of Wisconsin?" Uh, uh, and I said, "Sure." And so I made a couple pieces for this, took some old pieces and put it together, and made another installation in that space. I did not pick the color of the wall. That's kind of the rules of that. You sort of live with this particular environment. But it just reminds me so much of those walls in Pompeii, if you've ever seen them, where the Romans tended to red out stuff and then a draw in between it. So anyhow, so once again, and notice that they're all kind of metal now. and that was because I was trying to move towards the stuff that could go outside, except with the exception of these wings, which I probably find some these wings I had from another. So I tend to borrow wings because they take a long time to make, and oftentimes I don't show the same piece with the same wings in the same way. All right, so that summer I started printing again, and I printed this long thing. I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but I'll show you that I started printing a scroll with the idea of making a cranky. A cranky is a precursor to movies, where they would put a piece of paper in and tell a story, which they would just turn the scroll, and it would kind of tell a story, sort of like a little slideshow, only it's like a precursor to that. And I just started making this scroll. It ended up being 60 feet. I'm not even going to show you but half of it. And you can see all the different kinds of things that I'm printing. And it just goes on and on and on. It's one of those things that I really like that I need to find a better way to show. I'm working with Chris Coons to try to create an electronic cranky so that it can go back and forth, and that it will be easier on the piece. So let's go to the next one. Hold on. All right. So out of
Eric,
yeah.
Eric, can I interrupt you for a question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, the crankies, are you using, what kind of paper are you using, and are you printing with just one color and the sort of print on top, indirect printing as you called it?
Yes, printing with the I do a lot of blue. You'll notice that, and there are a number of reasons for that. Usually, that's the first color I start with to make the colored ones. The colored ones are made really with two colors. With three colors, with blue, magenta, and processed yellow. For the cranky, I'm using a paper that is and the thing is that I got it in a roll from Plaza Arts, and at the time I didn't think anything of it. I just opened it up and then threw the paper away, the wrapping away, and so I'm not exactly sure what I used. I used a what was called a rice paper, and it was used. It's supposed to be for practicing calligraphy, but it turned out to be a perfect paper, and I've tried to find other ones, and the other ones that they have as a replacement. I don't think the paper strands inside it are long enough. They just come apart on me.
There is a paper that's called wet strength paper.
Oh, wow.
Wet strength, and it's imported from, I think, the UK. I bought some on Amazon. Yeah. And it's used to make these lanterns that go on the water, and they don't. Okay. When they get wet, they don't disintegrate.
Well, that's good to know.
So it's a little bit on the expensive side. Yeah. But it may be helpful.
Yeah, no, that is helpful. That probably is helpful. Yeah.
It's called wet strength.
Yeah, I just wrote it down.
Right.
I'll be on the computer figuring that out a little later today. All right, so now I went to and that show. Somebody who was in that show liked my stuff and said they wanted it. Her name's Wynn. Her last name's Wynn, Van Wynn, and she invited me to show it in Virginia at the Mosaic Arts Gallery, and so I put a bunch of prints in there. But one of the things that's sort of new in here, all right, is now this painting, and that's a rubbing and a painting. And this is going to feature in my show coming up. You know, this is really a year and a half away from where we are now, and it has a lot of energy to it. I like it. It has the direct contact with the stuff we throw away, which is attractive to me. It has a lot of energy in it. I just almost an expressionist quality, abstract expressionist quality to it. So then I have my Artomatic. Artomatic came at a time when there were a lot of other things going on. I had another show at Portico that was getting ready to drop, and so I was kind of a mess, well, last year at this time. So this is a piece that I made, and you can see it's blue, and it's done with the masks, where I put masks down on the and then I print on top of it, and then I go back into it. I'll show you my process a little later, but you can see that I cut this into 5 different parts, and I think it works here, but I've done it on other times where it doesn't work, and I've been told by a number of gallerists that although I think it's really neat, they don't. So, um, but it got bought by a PG County, so I'm happy with that. You can see some smaller prints that I did, and now you can really see that they're on panels at times, or they're behind in these frames, right? And oh yeah, the other thing is I think it's important to add the sculptures along with it. I think it really, the fact that I'm doing a lot of things, I think informs the rest. I think that taken as a whole, it works better than to just do one or the other. So this is my mostly 2D exhibit. I think it's all 2D at Artists and Makers. It was just in April. This last month has been a crazy, crazy time for me because I really put together what I would think was a year's worth of work in the space of 6 months. I'm trying to get ready for the show. I have these prints. This one has a border like some of the earlier ones. This is on paper though, with a silk back, so it's the opposite of some of the other ones. That allows it to be a little more strong. It's so it doesn't get punctured, because I treat it like a scroll. I roll it up, and I did this other one without, and I started using this new paper from Clearprint. It's a vellum, a drafting vellum, and it's a little stronger, and I've been pretty impressed with it. It lays so flat that I didn't really feel like I needed to. This almost looks like this piece right here almost looks like it's a what do you call it, a piece of fabric almost, even though the fabric isn't on the back. So there are a bunch of different pictures that I've been drawing. I really had set aside drawing for almost 20 years, and I picked it back up again. And this is kind of what I wanted to do when I got back into the studio after the pandemic. I just wanted to draw. I didn't care what anybody thought about it. I hadn't even intended to show or sell them. But I'm thinking about a lot of things with this. I'm thinking about cubism, some of the Escher's ideas of space, expressionism, especially sort of abstract expressionism, and surrealism. I mean, those are the things I sort of think about when I'm doing it. But it's all probably tied up in the fact that I grew up in the 80s and 90s, consuming a lot of heavy metal magazine, Mobius, Geiger, that kind of thing. But I'm really conscious of trying to stay out of the trope. And part of the reason for that is those guys are better than me if I wanted to do that. And in fact, what I feel like I have to give is this idea of not being any of it, but being part of all of it. So it's like I'm thinking about those things. I've been affected by those kind of things, but I want to reflect it back in a sort of hybrid of things that I've seen over the course of my lifetime. So you can see that I play a lot with negative space. I tend to create, like, this is a negative version or a positive version or a negative version of that, depending on how you think about it. I'm thinking about different kinds of perspectives. I try to subvert those perspectives whenever I can. And but they all sort of start as a doodle, and they're kind of all a doodle when you look at it. The process at the end, I can show you that. So I'm going through, and once again, I am thinking about how things evolve and how things work. So a lot of this stuff has, man-made stuff and natural stuff sort of interacting with each other. So you can see that there's, I like to try to put some energy into it. I like to leave out stuff so that you have to jump from one part of the picture to the other. And like, I'll use these blacks next to the white. This one is has a lot of dark color in it.
Eric, are you thinking about when you're doing these kind of doodle drawings? I mean, there feels like a lot of, I don't want to say illustration, but like the idea of how things are composed in terms of cells and blocking. Get like a Frank Miller kind of black and white, like a Sin City kind of approach to creating these imageries where it's either in shadow or it's in light, it's in black and it's white, and it's just kind of like stark environments. Do you think almost like an illustrator in terms of the flow of a drawing? Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. The last couple of slides, it shows you how I sort of block out a little section. I think the thing is that with a lot of illustrators, I think they have to think, particularly when they're thinking we're drawing for publication, they have to think much more premeditated than I do. Like I'll just add things in, and they just can't do that if the page is going to read right. So, or at least I don't. If they can, I mean, most of the like the pencil drawing is already done before the inkers usually get to it, and they could be different people nowadays. I don't know if I
Also,
really.
yeah, I'm also thinking of like the idea of like the spaces between events. Like it's almost feel like you're having within a single drawing, like an event happen, and then you have space, and then another event happens, and then I guess it's like like the speed of how it's read feels kind of like some sequential art in a way. I guess that's what I'm getting at.
I'm looking at a lot of sequential art, so that has to enter into it, right? So so it's probably not all that conscious, but it's probably embedded pretty deep. I think that's probably where this is coming from mostly. So here's some of the biospheres. This is a close up of this, and you can see that that I have these masks that go through them, and then I go back and I fill them in a little bit so they're not like screaming. This is the one without the border before I put it on. So here's where we are today. So I also think I think it's fair to say that if I had two rooms, one of them would have been the drawings, and the other one would have been this. So it's sort of and they happen like within within a week of each other. So they really are at the same time. All right. So you're seeing these creatures. Some of them you've probably seen before, and some of the other ones. But I've also wanted to create a sort of installation in the middle, and not just think about them just as single, right? That this is and I got that idea a little bit from Maurizio Catalan, who had a show at the um, the Guggenheim, and he just put everything he ever made on this big, giant marionette thing that hung from the ceiling. So everything you just walked up the ramp in the Guggenheim, and you were watching all this. Well, my thought was, okay, just put it all in the middle, because that's the kind of space it is, and then put some stuff on the outside so that you'll create this sort of museum kind of. This reminds me a little bit of the Natural History Museum at Smithsonian, where they had a redo of the several sections, and they've kind of done this, particularly with their animals of the world, mammals of the world kind of thing. This is sort of close up, and you can see that, you know, this has never been shown before, and I'll show you this piece right here with the chainsaw had never been shown. That's brand new. Some of these have been shown once or twice, and some a couple times because I just. This is what the whole show looks like. So, like I said, I try to build to that space. That space is an amazing space, as Jordan must know. He works in it. I mean, the trick with that is the walls are easily as interesting as anything you could put on them, and so you got to be careful. And so one of the reasons I made these massive drawings is that I just wanted to keep the walls from sucking my sculptures into them. And I didn't want them all to be prints because I figured then it'd all just look like wallpaper. So you see all these things. This is probably my favorite sculpture. I love this sculpture. I don't know why, but this is an older sculpture. And this one had never been shown, just except for maybe one night at one of my other shows, but it didn't have a space in the gallery, so we actually showed it on the porch, and I took it down.
Eric, when you're building these creatures, I mean, do you have an idea of like, well, I want to make like a bird, I want to make a bug, I want to make an underwater thing, or does it kind of just as you're composing the sculpture, you say, oh, this could be in this environment, or this needs to be up high or down low. This is a bottom feeder. Do you kind of have a narrative of like where this creature comes from as you're building it?
Um, yes, mostly I sort of think about it in my own way. Like I think of it as if it looked like a particular kind of animal. What's interesting is sometimes that animal might change along the way because I might be building it and I might go, oh, that's like I always thought of this one as a flying one, even if it could easily be in the water, right? This one that's Ali's Lattes. Um, and this one just looks like, you know, I mean, they all have their sort of look to them, but they're not that thing in particular. Like I never say that it's this. I always give it a Latin name, and I usually find some element in there that I that describes it, right? So I don't call it, you know, uh, anteater or flying squirrel.
Oh, I see. And are you welding things
Yeah, I do a lot
together?
of welding. Actually, this is interesting. This is a much older piece, and you can look at the welds if you were able to see them, and they're not so good. I went and took a bunch of classes at Frederick Community College. I can't say enough good things about that community college for welding. They have a unbelievable facility, and the teachers are great, and they paid for my taking the test to become. When I was done with that class, I um, could have ended up being a welder on a bridge somewhere if I wanted to. But I I teach for a living. I've done that. I prefer to be indoors than outdoors in the middle of the summer. So, and I get paid twice as much as they do. So I'd rather do this. All right.
Great.
Yeah.
And what do you usually make your wings from?
Well, in this case, I made them from you'll see that these are metal down here right at the joints, but this is these are reflectors that you put in the
Oh,
and and then this is made out of in this case is cardboard, but you know this thing is made out of out of a out of like a fender for a car. So you've seen this piece, I think, and I thought that you could see it big. You could see all these negative spaces a little better. And now here's the sort of big, it's sort of a big moment for me was doing these large drawings and then using these poster hangers to put them up. Now I probably would have ripped through if I didn't put the silk on the back. And then I went back in with these Posca pens and started putting in all these little details, and it really did pop. It really changed the piece. I kind of liked what happened here. You can see that I put a bunch of rubbings, a bunch of this goes back to that piece that was at the Virginia Mosaic Gallery where I started drawing, and I wanted to use a bunch of different mediums. So I'm going to show you just a snippet of this, and then I'm going to turn it over to Anne. Anne's going to do some of her show us. She has a way to be able to show the sound, do the sound that I can't do. But these are playing in the gallery. And I never intended them to be like high quality because I always sort of intended to show them up on a wall like I did at the gallery in Glen Echo. But a lot of people had always asked me, do like creatures move? And I couldn't really do that. And, because then it would be all about robotics or something, and it'd be a different animal entirely. But you can see that the junk is floating around. It can be anything, right? It could be the Pacific garbage patch. I have no understanding exactly what they're supposed to be, but it's fitting within the same thing of using garbage to describe the kinds of world we're creating. I'm going to skip this other one because I feel like we're running out of time. So I want to make sure that Anne gets to talk about this a little bit because she can best talk about her biophonies.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Anne Burson. So the way I feed into what Eric just presented is that I created a sound component that goes with his exhibit at the Glen Echo Stone Tower Gallery. So I met Eric like 22 years ago, I guess in 2003. And at that time he was, he had some of his sculptures on a website and I had looked at them and quickly realized that there could be a collaboration there. So I have a background as a musician, piano, voice, percussion. I have long been interested in found sounds. I'm interested in art as a full sensory immersive experience. I like going into those spaces like the Yayoi Kusama exhibit at the Smithsonian where you're just surrounded. I like the visual and that sort of where I'm just taking it in on all levels. And again, I'm interested in sort of challenging mainstream conceptions of music and have long been interested in the sort of sculptural qualities of sound, and sound is not only rhythmic and melodic, but having textural, timbral, spatial, dimensional components to it. And so, again, when I met Eric, I thought, I would love to create the soundscape that goes with this world that he's putting together with these creatures. Eric didn't say this as explicitly as he might have, but his work really speaks to the effects of human consumption, of material consumption, the waste we produce, how we affect the biological world around us, how we affect the possible evolution as creatures have to adapt to our presence and our waste, reduced habitat, the plastics we might put in the ground, all of that. And so the sound that I created does that as well. It is, I'm gonna try to play some for you and then I'll talk more about it so you can hear what I'm talking about.
I think the creatures are whimsical at the same time they have their serious side. But if it was just a drawing, then it really just sort of stays Yeah, actually, I feel like the two work in concert. Yeah.
Yeah, so about 10 years ago, actually probably 2014, we were in London and went to the Horniman Museum and encountered the work of a ecoacoustician named Bernie Krause, who had been doing field recordings around the world in some of the most pristine wild places, rainforests in Zimbabwe, Borneo, South America, and various places. And he developed a theory of acoustic niches that in a mature ecosystem, the animals will occupy different acoustic niches, from the highest bats and insects to birds and mammals, and they will again occupy different frequencies and occupy different spaces in time. So what he did was put them on a spectrogram, and this black and white picture, actually most of the time when you see his work as an art installation, you see it in color, but this works too. You will see these different frequencies where, like, the elephants way down low, way up high, we've got insects, we've got the frogs in the middle, birds here, but you might also see them punctuated, and you might actually sometimes see them responding to each other. And his hypothesis is that, this promotes efficient communication when you're trying to find a mate, when you're trying to find food, when you're trying to give a warning, and so on. And you can study the health of an ecosystem that way as well, by the density of the sound, or what's missing. And so when I created these pieces, I was thinking about that. I listened to our local soundscapes and also tried to imagine, since our local soundscapes are not pristine wilderness, tried to imagine other sounds that might be doing what a healthy ecosystem might do. And I recreated them with found objects. So in the same idea, in the same vein as Eric, where he's creating imaginary creatures. These creatures aren't supposed to be something specific. They're sort of referential to the idea of a creature. This is like that. We've got high sounds that are going across the top. We have periodic other sounds that might remind you of a bird or a mammal. We have very low sounds at times. And again, these sounds are never going to have the beauty and complexity of a real wild space. And so I was not trying to say, look, I've recreated this. It really is for you to consider what this says about the beauty of real wild spaces and sort of the tragedy of how we erode those spaces. So that's what I hope I'm adding to Eric's gallery presentation here. Creates an immersive experience and a temporal sense to it as well.
So I think it fits very well with the idea of creating a museum where you are seeing audio and visual and sculptural mishmash put together. Because when I go to the museum now, if you go to the Natural History Museum, it's not just a bunch of specimens on the wall or just a diorama like it was when I was growing up. There's a lot of things to, you will be immersed in audio, and I thought the audio really filled out my vision for trying to create this kind of my thought along the lines of saving the new environments and those kind of things are that I don't have any prescriptions for them. I think that the thing is that no matter what we do to the environment, we may not be here, but that the environment will eventually come back to some sort of stasis again, as it has always done, until the next calamity, which is usually this is sort of the first time that some conscious being is at hand in it. So, anyhow, so what I'll talk to Anne about maybe making this this whole presentation available on the site next to, and then all they have to do is press a button, and you could say you want to hear the audio, you can press these buttons. Maybe that'll work. But we'll have to talk to Anne about how available she wants these things.
I will just quickly point out, because I think I forgot to do this, while the gray one is a representation of something done by Bernie Krause, the colored one here is one that I created using a spectrogram app. I played my Biophany part, and then used that app and took a screenshot. So you can see here are some little sort of hooty sounds and some sort of chirpy sounds and some sort of ringing, insect-like sounds and crickety sort of sounds here and so on.
And you, I mean, this is just kind of an idea or a question and an idea that's tied together somehow. But when you're kind of composing the sounds to correspond with the exhibition, are you specifically looking at some of the creatures that have been composed by Eric and say, this is on this wavelength or this kind of radio frequency, so it can then inhabit this sound, and then this larger creature, this kind of thing that weighs 2 million pounds, and Eric is going to frustratedly put it together, is more like an elephant type wavelength. Do you kind of fit it to the what creatures are being presented in the gallery space, or is it kind of more generic? How do you decide what sounds to compose in the piece? Does it make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question. I hope I don't disappoint by saying that, well, there's sort of two parts to this. The Biophanies I created separately with sort of just the goal in general that they would sort of fit in. A lot of the creatures that he showed in this exhibit, he just made or had made after I made my first Biophany. I actually showed the first Biophany with his NOMA gallery presentation in 2019. Just one night, just played through it. And then I created Biophany II during the pandemic when I happened to be on sabbatical leave, and just sort of hold myself in this room and started recording things. But I was very much thinking just about piecing together an ecosystem in general. Were there coyotes there? Were there owls? Were there, like, what could be moving in this? The videos that Eric made came with sound too. And in that situation, I was creating specifically for his artwork. So again, we couldn't play the sound with that, but that sort of, there's almost a underwater feeling of things sort of floating around in his videos. And so I specifically chose bottles of different pitches and played around with the timing on that in GarageBand so that things were slower than I had played them, and sort of layered those in to create a sort of serene, almost breath-like quality to it.
And I guess my follow-up question is for a little bit of both of you. This feels very kind of timely to me personally. I guess I'm listening to and diving into the kind of birth of AI and how that kind of affects our evolution as humans, because it kind of feels like we are almost playing God a little bit by creating this entity that has all of human intelligence and kind of combined in these kind of programs, these chat GPTs or whatever you want to call them. And it feels in a way like, well, what happens when this new being starts creating other beings? And it kind of feels like, in a way, it's like a matrixy kind of thing, like these weird squid-like creatures are being composed that are, if a superior being had control over a new creature. And I'm obsessed with sci-fi anyway, so this is kind of always on my mind. But it does feel like you're kind of creating the next stage, or I know you said alternate stage, but is there kind of a fear or desire to create in the same respect that, like, if there weren't humans, I'm creating a more superior version of these creatures that are, even though there are ways, there are betters in a way. Is that kind of getting, I don't know how to ask this
Yeah,
question better.
I think there's definitely a cautionary aspect to this, but I think Eric would probably say he doesn't want to be too prescriptive, so I'll let him finish the thought.
I would say that I wouldn't say that necessarily that the creatures of the future would be more would be superior. What they would be is more adapted to the environment that they are in. Sometimes that means you're a bigger elephant, and sometimes that means you're a mosquito. Um, Both highly, the mosquito is probably more successful in the long run, even though it's smaller and maybe less powerful. Um, I, I I think there's definitely some sort of cautioning. I think the thing is that I I don't know what the future holds. It's not guaranteed.
I want to add something else in there because while you could look at this and hear this and come away feeling like, wow, this is scary. Now I'm depressed. you, Eric had an interesting conversation with the gallery attendant down in the Stone Tower Gallery, who was asking about humor. And because if you look at some of these pieces for long enough, you're like, well, that one's sort of smiling at me, or that one, there is sort of an element of humor, and there's definitely an aesthetic element too. This is not meant to be so austere that you just want to run away screaming. There is something remarkably aesthetic, beautiful about it as well. And I think it probably just raises more questions to consider. I'll let other people think about what they like or don't like, and so on. But there is something to just sort of sit and experience. It's not just a runaway screaming kind of thing.
I think it's definitely there's humor to particularly the creatures, and I often get a little concerned that some of the other stuff that isn't the creatures becomes more austere and more oppressive, or depressive, as the case might be. I also think art in and of itself is a hopeful act, and that I think that when we create art, it's not necessarily because even if it's about a difficult subject, it's usually in service of maybe making the world a better place, a more hopeful place. At least that's my thought. So I want to get to the process so that we can try to stay within our hour, best we can, which we're getting over. So let me move on. So this is my processes. Uh, talked a little bit about that. I have this vacuum cleaner. The idea was I had the vacuum cleaner and I thought I'd try to put some wings on it. That's kind of all I had. I had some wings hanging around from another project and I tried to put them in. I decided that when I started to put it, originally I was just going to add it into the plastic, and I realized it wasn't going to be strong enough. So I ended up having to make a whole sort of endoskeleton around it. And so it took a while. The older welds on the wings were so old. That's when I didn't know what I was doing. And I really needed to go back and remake them. And so I did. So I remade the wing parts for the most part. And it was well worth the time, even though it created a crunch. One of the things about borrowing wings is usually I make two for everything. This was I picked this out of a pile of wings I had, and turned out it was from a sculpture where I had made one wing big and one wing small. So I'm like, oh, now I have to build new wings. So there I'm off to the races the last minute trying to make these things, and I did, but I only got them done like 5 minutes before Lucas came to help me put the stuff up. So I'm glad he got there, but it was a race against time. All right, so this is more like what the process looks like. I get a large piece of something or other. In this case, it was a something I probably shouldn't have cut, but I did. And then because I wanted it to breathe a little bit and to be able to see through, and I did that. And then originally I was going to put that on the head, and I thought, found this on the side of the road and picked that out instead. Started to put a tail on it. And then I got to a point where I'm like, I don't know, this isn't really doing it for me. So I stopped for a while. So it's like in this process of like I was going to put this on it and I took it off. So there's a lot more. Usually I don't say I'm going to do this one thing and then do it. I'm picking and choosing, and then I put things on, and then I hate them, and then I put new ones on, and yeah, that's kind of how that goes. So this is a process a little bit. I've been working on this one for like 5 years, easy, right? Because I thought I had an idea. It worked out pretty good, and then I hit a snag when it came to the wings. And finally, for the show, I'm like, we got to finish this thing. And I put it together, and it looked like this, and I go, oh my goodness, that's not going to do. And then I put this other stuff on to make it work. So I think it kind of works now, but I'm telling you, there was a time there when it didn't work. Drawing processes, I started doodling, doodle some more. You see, I sort of map out where I might be going with it. All right. This is going to hook onto two other pieces, I think. I was going to put this in the show for at Artists and Makers, but then I realized I started doing the math and I realized it never would be done. So I thought, well, I can do a print. That won't take as long because this takes like 800 times longer than so, and that's the one thing I forgot about drawing. It takes a long time. So, the other stuff's more immediate. This shows you a little more of my processes with the drawing, mapping stuff up. You can see that I put all these lines in and then I didn't use them, right? I didn't use them at all, right? So here I did. I had a whole different idea about how I was doing, and then I did this. So you can sort of see how things change along the way. Printing, put the masks down. You can see them. Sometimes it looks so cool, even though I have the mask on, and I know that I'm going to rip it up and it's not going to be there. So I pull off those masks, and then I have these whites, and you see how they're just like they don't. You have to fill them up, So I'll go back and I fill them up a little bit, and then you end up with this thing at the top. So that's essentially how I work. Is that I work intuitively. Usually, have a general idea about what I'm doing, but a lot of the specifics are. I mean, Jordan, when you're making your pieces, when you do the abstract pieces that you do, I mean, I can't think that everything you've thought out beforehand. You haven't sketched everything out, have you? Or do you work a little bit like that?
No, it's usually a reaction to the previous medium.
Yeah,
It's cut stencils as a starting place. I don't
yeah.
necessarily have composition, then spray paint, then reaction to spray paint would be other mixed media, and then by the time I get to oil paint as the final touch, because of the way it dries, it's usually touch up process. And by that time, I usually have an idea of what it wants to be, but it's always a collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
I can't stop thinking about, I mean, you got to be looking at Piranesi, right? With the movement and stuff, so forth. The old Italian guy, printmaker.
Um,
Oh my God,
if I
man.
am, I'm not looking at him like consciously, but
He's like their father of Escher kind of thing, but I mean, they look like imaginary dungeons that Piranesi would make. He's one of my
oh, you know what? I did. I know who you're talking about. The answer is I started looking at him when I was doing the drawings recently.
yeah.
Um, but with the printmaking, I hadn't seen his stuff. I probably have seen it, but then just didn't register. But I saw some of those Piranesi drawings recently, um, and what I do a lot of now that I started doing the drawing is if I see something that I like on my phone when I'm looking through stuff, I just I take that picture and put it in with I have a file of images just to look at, and sometimes I just sit there when I have a moment and just look through images over and over and over again.
No,
So
these feel very at home to me, and it's like you're creating another. To me, they feel almost environmental, like when you get into the scale that you're creating
yeah,
a world.
yeah,
And when I was building similar kind of worlds out of graphite powder, it felt like Well, now we're in a new situation and gravity is kind of different. And, all these factors are different in this new world. So you have to kind of create new boundaries for the environment and you know, uh, new laws of physics even. And, who is the creator of these worlds? It's not humans anymore. It's something else.
Yeah.
So for me, it was the Tower of Babel in outer space, and there's no gravity, and the tower is building itself. And this feels very at home to me. I really, really enjoy the work.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that. I think that I think particularly these things play with scale. They play with whether they're um, in underwater or in the air. It's just like it's not it's abstract enough, but what makes it sort of different than just complete abstract is that you have these actual elements that are there that are from our everyday lives, and I'm interjecting those in and using those as the foundation for all of this. Sort of like our everyday lives are intertwined with a lot of these. I'm not the first artist to sort of push this notion of trying to lessen the boundary between our everyday existence and art, right? And that's kind of, I'm sort of in that line of merging how we go about our business and how and putting that in reframing it in an art.
Thank you again, guys. It's
Yep.
been awesome, and I encourage everyone to go check out the exhibition, the Stone Tower.
Wonderful work and wonderful presentation. Thank you
Hear and
both.
experience it all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, listen, thank you for everything. I really appreciate it. I really, this was fun to do. It focused me a lot on what I've been doing and why I'm doing it. I mean,
Right.
I do that, but this was sort of a laser focus on trying to make sure I know what I'm doing, where I'm going. So I appreciate the effort.
Awesome. Cool.
All right. Thank you
Thanks,
so
everyone.
much.
We'll
All
see
right.
you all in 3 weeks. We have Claudia Aziza Gibson Hunter coming to talk about her work and also her involvement with Black Artists of DC. So should be a lot of fun.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All
Have a
right.
great
Bye.
weekend.
Bye.